A Christmas Carol has received hundreds of adaptations over the years, with some ranging from downright exceptional to others that weren't so good. But befitting the fact that Charles Dickens' classic story may be among the best ever written, as I explained in my video on the Muppet Christmas Carol, which you can find a link in the description to, it's only natural that it would be a favorite among writers to adapt. But despite just how many times it's been brought to the big and small screen over the years, it might surprise many to learn that there are quite a few aspects to Dickens' book that are almost always omitted, as well as things that weren't in the novel that are almost always depicted, with Scrooge meeting Belle at Fezziwig's party being just one example, as that doesn't actually happen in the book. In fact, out of all of the countless adaptations out there, there's pretty much only one that's considered about as close to Dickens' original story as any can possibly get. And today, I'd like to go over this particular version of A Christmas Carol, and specifically what it includes from the book that most other adaptations don't. And there will be spoilers ahead, so in case you somehow don't know the story of A Christmas Carol, please do yourself a favor and come back another day. Okay, so a couple of reasons often given for why adaptations of A Christmas Carol deviate from the original book is because the novel's story is too short for a feature-length film, so naturally additions are needed to fill out the extra runtime, and because each person to tackle the source material wants to make their own version unique, which is fair, since if every version was exactly like the book, then there would be no point in making them. But that being said, the adaptation in question here, which is the 1971 25-minute short film A Christmas Carol, being a ghost story of Christmas, which, yes, is actually the full title of Charles Dickens' book and one of the only adaptations to keep that, gets around this problem both by being short and for its rather deranged animation style courtesy of Richard Williams. Seriously, this adaptation manages to capture the horror of Dickens' book like no other, simply because everything is drawn to look as close to the way Dickens describes it as possible, and the results are often not pleasant. But I'll get back to that a little later. The point is, even if it has to rush through a few things, this short's one and only goal is to be as literal an adaptation of Dickens' book as it can possibly be, and most definitely succeeds on that front. Because in addition to its title, among the many things that this adaptation includes from Dickens' book that most others usually don't, is Scrooge seeing a ghostly hearse on the steps after encountering Marley's face on the door knocker, Marley's jaw dropping down to his chest after removing his bandage, Scrooge extinguishing the ghost of Christmas past with the candle snuffer it's carrying and ending up back in his bedroom, a particularly notable one where the ghost of Christmas present shows Scrooge various people who live in isolation yet manage to have a great time and the Christmas spirit regardless, as well as the spirit's ability to spread Christmas cheer just with a flicker of his torch, and Scrooge actually being shown his dead body before he realizes whose body it is, among quite a few other things. And these changes do indeed give this adaptation a feeling closer to the one the original book invokes that most others aren't quite able to capture. Though what many felt also helped was the casting of Alistair Sim as Ebenezer Scrooge, because just for those of you who don't know, Sim was a British comedian that had previously played Scrooge to great acclaim in the 1951 version, and to this day his performance is still considered one of the best portrayals of the character, so having him reprise his role here only adds to just how closely many feel this movie captures the spirit of the original book. Though as I briefly touched on before, one other thing that must also be brought up is its animation style, because Richard Williams did not hold anything back here when it came to depicting the horrors described by Dickens, and the results are nightmare-inducing. Whether it's Marley's deeply unsettling ghost, the practically demonic depictions of ignorance and want, or the simple foreboding presence that is the ghost of Christmas yet to come, the animation does not pull any punches nor serve to make the story easier to watch. The one character that has to be given special mention is the ghost of Christmas past. Because Dickens' description of the ghost in the book can be best described as bizarre, being both young and old, and growing and losing limbs and heads as it stands there. As you can see by the quote on screen, which is lifted directly from the novel, it's very hard to get a visual grasp on. In fact, said description was so out there that it was the only thing his illustrator didn't even try to draw, and instead simply used a ball of light to represent the ghost. And it's for a similar, very understandable reason that most adaptations forego this depiction altogether and go with something more practical and visually grounded, though some still like to play with its surreal nature a bit, such as in the Muppets version. But this adaptation is the one and only time somebody ever even tried to visually bring Dickens' description to life. And the results are not only considered to be pretty dang close to it, but indicative of the entire short in a nutshell. I mean, look at this thing! It's both an amazing example of the limitless possibilities of hand-drawn animation, as well as the most visually accurate description of the Ghost of Christmas Past ever, and something straight out of a deranged Christmas-fueled fever dream all at the same time. But despite it definitely carrying an air of surreal horror to it that most other adaptations don't, if one that was also present in Dickens' original novel, the short was met with instant critical acclaim, and to this day is considered one of the best versions of the book ever made, both for its accuracy and visual style. In fact, it was so well liked that despite being made for TV, it actually ended up being released in movie theaters and went on to win the Academy Award for Best Animated Short, which still makes it the only adaptation of A Christmas Carol with that distinction. Yes, that's right. Out of the hundreds of versions of the book, this is the only one to win an Academy Award. And even then, its win was somewhat disputed because it had been released on television first, causing the Academy to change the rules afterwards so that only shorts released in theaters before anywhere else could be eligible for the award. But this short's win still stood since it won before that rule was put in place. But while it's regarded as one of the best adaptations of Dickens' novel ever, there is one criticism this short has faced, and that's that it might be a little too short. Because while Dickens' book, as is, may be too short for feature length, it also has more material than can be reasonably squeezed into 25 minutes. And as a result, a few things actually were omitted, most notably the scene with Scrooge's sister Fan, as well as when the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come shows Scrooge a young couple reacting in delight over his death. But even apart from that, due to said length, most of the short gives off the vibe that it's in a bit of a rush and that certain scenes aren't really allowed to breathe or get the attention they arguably deserve, most notably the beginning that establishes Scrooge's cruelty and Tiny Tim's death, which only lasts a few seconds. So as a result, it doesn't exactly have the emotional impact that some other versions do, because what they lack in this short's accuracy, they make up for in having more time to make Scrooge's redemption and what surrounds it pack a bigger emotional punch. But despite that problem, the short's still considered so good that many are willing to overlook it. Sure, most will still concede that it's not the best adaptation in terms of getting the raw emotion and morals of Dickens' book across, but if one already knows how the story goes, which most obviously do, then it still most definitely works, especially because it's so accurate to the book in many places that most others are not, making it perfect for those who want to get a more visual feel of what the story in Dickens' head might have actually looked like. And let me assure you, especially when it comes to such things as the Ghost of Christmas Past, this is indeed as accurate as you're ever going to get. Which is why it's still considered among the most notable versions of A Christmas Carol, and very rightfully so at that. Alright, I think that was everything I wanted to bring up. But now I'd like you to tell me, do you believe that the 1971 adaptation of A Christmas Carol is one of the greatest out there for just how true it stays to Charles Dickens' original text? Or do you believe it's too short and weird to really be able to stand alongside the best versions? Please let me know however you feel in the comments below, because you are under no obligation to agree with this video just because you watched it. If you absolutely hate the 1971 version of A Christmas Carol and think I was completely backwards with everything I said, that is perfectly okay, and I have no issue with you for feeling that way. And thank you all for watching. It is all very appreciated, and I hope to see you all next time.